He said, "I ain't scared to die," threw up a set, and stepped into a crowd that wasn't playing. Less than a minute later, it was all over. 2 on the ground, 1 paralyzed, and a name from a classic hood film splattered across the headlines. But before that night, before the blood in that parking lot, he was just another young dude trying to balance 2 different worlds: Hollywood dreams and South Central streets. This is the story of Dedric Gobert, but don't get it twisted. This ain't no movie script. Dedric Dwayne Gobert was born on November 25th, 1971, in Shreveport, Louisiana, a small city in the northwest corner of the state. Not much is out there about his earliest years, but at some point, he and his family packed up and headed west, landing in California. They settled in Inglewood, a city with deep black roots, booming with soul, but back then, it was also heavy with gang politics and turf tensions. Inglewood in the 80s wasn't just sunny streets and lowriders. It was a place where murder rates were climbing, colors mattered, and just being on the wrong block could get you pressed. In 1989, the murder rate jumped 50% from the year before, 46 homicides that year alone, according to the LA Times. That put it just a few bodies short of its all-time high. This was where Dedric came of age, a teenager watching the city shift. The soundtrack of his life wasn't just hip-hop and West Coast funk. It was sirens, shouts, and the pop of gunfire in the distance. And it wasn't just Inglewood. Right next door was South Central LA, Crip-heavy territory, thick with long-standing beef between Crips and Bloods. Inglewood leaned more toward the Blood side, but lines blurred quick. And even walking to school was a roll of the dice. One wrong glance, one wrong hoodie, one wrong answer to "where you from" could mean you didn't make it home. Dedric wasn't some big-time banger. He didn't have tattoos spelling out hood names or rap sheets pages long. But growing up where he did, you couldn't help but soak in the code: who you nod to, who you don't, and when to keep your mouth shut. Still, he wasn't boxed in by it. Dedric had other interests: film, music, cars, and like a lot of kids from the block, he started dreaming about something bigger, maybe even making it out. Somehow, through all the chaos, he landed on the radar of director John Singleton, who was casting for a gritty new film straight out of South Central, a film that would blur the line between fiction and reality. That connection, it would change Dedric's life. But here's the thing: when you come up in the hood and catch a break, it doesn't mean you left the hood behind. Dedric was still riding around with his homies, hitting up parties, and later, street races. The Hollywood light was there, yeah, but the shadows were still long. And before long, they'd catch up to him. In 1990, director John Singleton was fresh out of USC Film School and ready to make his mark. He had written a script that mirrored the South Central LA life he knew firsthand. And he wasn't about to cast polished Hollywood actors to play kids from the hood. He wanted authenticity, real faces from real streets. That's how Dedric Gobert, just 19 at the time, landed a role in what would become one of the most iconic films of the 1990s, Boyz n the Hood. Singleton met Dedric during the early casting process. Dedric had the look, the presence, and the kind of laid-back energy that felt real. He didn't need to study street life for the role, he was already living it. Singleton offered him the part of Dookie, one of Doughboy's quiet homeboys who mostly chilled in the background, always with the pacifier dangling from his lips. The pacifier wasn't made up for the role either. According to some who knew him, Dedric had actually started using pacifiers in real life to help quit smoking. Singleton thought it added character, so he kept it in the film, and it stuck. After Boyz n the Hood dropped in July 1991, Dookie's pacifier look actually started a short-lived trend. Teenagers from LA to New York began rocking pacifiers as fashion statements. Dedric's role didn't have a lot of lines, but that didn't matter. His presence was part of the film's realism. He wasn't a loudmouth or a hothead. He was the quiet observer, sucking on his pacifier while violence, brotherhood, and tragedy played out around him. In a way, Dookie symbolized that numbness a lot of young black men felt back then, seeing everything, feeling everything, but keeping it all inside. Boyz n the Hood was a cultural earthquake. It brought the inner city experience to mainstream America with no sugarcoating. It earned Singleton Oscar nominations for Best Director and Best Original Screenplay, making him both the first African American and the youngest person ever nominated for Best Director. The film starred Cuba Gooding Jr. as Trey, Ice Cube as Doughboy, and Morris Chestnut as Ricky. But even the smaller roles like Dedric's got noticed. That visibility opened doors. Singleton brought Dedric back for his next two films. In 1993's Poetic Justice, starring Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur, Dedric played Dwayne, a friend of Tupac's character. It was a small role, but he shared screen time with hip-hop royalty. Then came Higher Learning in 1995, where he appeared briefly as one of Ice Cube's college homies. That film would end up being released posthumously. So by the time he was 22, Dedric had credits in 3 major films. He had worked with some of the most influential Black creatives in Hollywood. And yet, despite this run, Dedric never fully left the streets. And the streets, they never really let go of him either. Dedrick Gobert had one foot in the spotlight and the other still planted in Inglewood. To a lot of people, he wasn't Dookie from the movies. He was just Dedric. He still kicked it with the same circle, still pulled up at the same house parties, and still moved through the same streets that had raised him. The early 90s in LA weren't just about gangbanging. They were about survival. The Rodney King beating in 1991 had set the city on edge. Then, the riots in April '92 blew the lid off. South Central burned, National Guard tanks rolled through Crenshaw, and the line between law and lawless got blurry. It was during that same stretch that Dedric was filming with Singleton and building his acting resume. But when the cameras weren't rolling, the tension outside was still real. During this era, a temporary truce between gangs in Watts and other areas gave people hope. Murders dipped in some hoods for a while, and Singleton even wore a baseball cap with the slogan, "Increase the peace," during press tours. But the peace didn't last everywhere. By 1994, Louisiana County was reporting record numbers again. According to Los Angeles Times reports, gang killings in sheriff-patrolled areas reached 218 that year, higher than even the bloody highs of 1991. Dedric was navigating this storm with a dream in one hand and reality in the other. He wasn't balling off Hollywood checks. Those roles paid decent, but not enough to get a young actor out the hood entirely. So he stayed connected, not necessarily as a gang member, but as someone still living in the orbit. You feel me? And like a lot of young dudes in LA back then, he got into the street racing scene. Illegal drag races had always been a thing, especially late at night, far out in spots like Mira Loma or Palmdale. These weren't fast and furious setups. These were dusty back roads, headlights flashing, crowds placing bets, engines screaming. It was adrenaline, escape, and ego all rolled into one. That's how Dedric spent some of his downtime, hitting races with his girlfriend Jenny Hyon and his homie Ignacio Nacho Hernandez. They weren't looking for trouble, but when the streets are watching, trouble usually finds you first. Dedric was still young, just 22, and while he had tasted the dream, he hadn't made it all the way out yet. He still had plans. Higher Learning was wrapped. Maybe more roles were coming. Maybe music videos, maybe commercials, maybe even TV. But when you're still half in, half out, that's when it gets most dangerous because you're not fully protected by either world. To some, Dedric was Hollywood. To others, he was still just some dude from Inglewood. And sometimes both sides expect you to prove something. The story that would unfold next wasn't written in a script. It didn't have a director yelling cut. It was raw, fast, and final, and Dedric wouldn't survive it. By the time 1994 rolled around, Los Angeles was still reeling from a decade of chaos. The crack epidemic, turf wars, and high-profile police brutality cases had left scars across the city. The gang truces that followed the 1992 LA riots were starting to fade, and the streets were heating back up. Sheriff Sherman Block told the Los Angeles Times that the shift in violence was noticeable. Drive-bys were down, but more walk-up shootings. Straight confrontations, more personal. In the parts of LA County patrolled by the Sheriff's Department, gang killings hit 218 in 1994, the highest ever recorded there. Some of the worst hit areas weren't the central city, but places like Mira Loma, Palmdale, and unincorporated zones where deputies, not LAPD, had jurisdiction. Racial lines in the gang world were also blurring. While Crips and Bloods still dominated headlines, other crews like the Asian Boyz, Tiny Rascals Gang, and Filipino-American cliques like ABC, Acro Boys Crazy were growing fast. These weren't just copycats. They had their own codes, alliances, and sets. In Southern California, a red rag didn't always mean black. ABC, for example, repped blood culture, but was almost entirely Filipino. The streets weren't just dangerous for those in the life. Sometimes being affiliated by association or even just being present could get you caught up. Tensions between Asian gangs and Latino crews were rising, and even within blood-affiliated groups, internal beefs broke out. South LA might have been the heart of gang activity, but places like Riverside County were becoming battlegrounds of their own. And Dedrick Gobert, he was still out there, floating between movie sets and the back streets. He was wrapped on Higher Learning, which would drop posthumously in January '95, and had time to breathe. So when his homie, Ignacio Hernandez, mentioned a street race happening on a cool Saturday night, November 19th, 1994, Dedrick rolled out. He probably didn't think twice. Street racing was a regular thing. Loud cars, long roads, some fast money changing hands, and a chance to unwind with friends, away from the cameras, away from industry talk. But the wrong combination of pride, gang ego, and a misunderstood gesture would flip the script that night. It was early evening when Dedrick, 22, headed out east with his crew. With him were Ignacio Nacho Hernandez, his 16-year-old girlfriend Jenny Hyon, and their homegirl Mel Gularis. They drove about 50 miles from LA to Mira Loma in Riverside County, a semi-rural area where street racers could gather without much police heat. The scene was typical: 2-lane stretches of road, car engines popping off, headlights lined up like a drag strip, and small clusters of people placing side bets. That night, there were about 40 people posted up on Etiwanda Avenue. Dedrick and his circle weren't looking for static, but during one of the runs, Ignacio's car got cut off by another driver, a Filipino teen, according to court testimony. Both cars screeched to a halt and words got exchanged, heated words. The Filipino youth had his squad behind him, around 10 deep. When the shouting turned to shoving, they surrounded Ignacio. Dedrick stood nearby, fists flew. The fight didn't go long. Sirens broke it up. Sheriff's deputies had been tipped off about illegal racing in the area and rolled through, lights flashing. The crowd scattered, nobody arrested. Dedrick's group left the race spot and dipped a few miles down to a pizza parlor parking lot to cool off. It was past 2 a.m. The food spot was closed, but the lot was quiet enough to talk things over. But unknown to them, the group they clashed with earlier wasn't done. And they weren't just random dudes. They were part of ABC, a Filipino-American gang tied to the Bloods. Some of their crew had already been involved in the earlier altercation. Now they had regrouped, bringing in more heads. Some estimates say 15 to 30 of them had linked up. As Dedrick and his people stood outside their ride, the ABC crew rolled up. There was yelling right away. One younger member allegedly pulled a strap and pointed it at Jenny's face. She froze. But an older gang member stepped in and told the younger dude to fall back. Mel tried to calm everyone down, saying it wasn't worth it. And for a second, it looked like it might de-escalate. Dedrick got back in his car, but instead of leaving, he started driving slowly past the group. He revved the engine, back and forth, classic hood move. Not necessarily a threat, but definitely a challenge. He was hot, maybe trying to prove a point, maybe thinking it would blow over. That's when the chant started. Blood, blood, blood. The ABC crew was deep, hyped, and now fully claiming set. Dedrick stopped the car, stepped out, and walked right up to the crowd. No backup, just him. Witnesses said he threw up a Crip sign, asked, "What's up, cuz?" That one word, cuz, was a serious diss to any blood set. Then he yelled, "F you, slobs, I ain't scared to die." Now, whether Dedrick was really a Crip or just talking reckless isn't fully clear. Some said he seemed drunk, others said he was just wilding off adrenaline. But in gang culture, those words and that move, that's enough to get anybody hit. Someone yelled, "He's reaching," when Dedrick moved toward his waistband. Whether he had a weapon or not didn't matter at that point. They rushed him. He was jumped instantly, feet, fists, knees, a full-on mob attack. Ignacio saw him go down and ran in, throwing his own body over Dedrick to shield him. Jenny and Mel tried to break through, screaming, swinging, doing whatever they could. Jenny caught a kick to the head. Witnesses said the beating started to slow. A couple of gang members were walking off. Then came the gunshots. Sonny Enraca, a 22-year-old Filipino immigrant and reputed ABC member, stood over the pile. He pulled a .38 caliber revolver. First, he grabbed Ignacio off Dedrick's back, point blank, shot him once in the chest, then again in the back of the head. Then he turned the gun on Dedrick. Dedrick was already bloodied and slumped. Enraca pulled the trigger again. One bullet right to the back of the head. Jenny Hyon, who had just turned 16, rushed toward him in a blind rage. She kicked Enraka in the back. He turned and shot her too. The bullet hit the side of her neck. Everything scattered after that. Cars peeled off. Bodies were left behind. When the sheriffs pulled up around 2:20 a.m., they found Dedric and Ignacio dead. Jenny was still alive, but paralyzed from the neck down. Male was bruised, but physically unharmed. Enraka fled the scene. It wasn't just another fight, it was a calculated gang move. Witnesses later said Enraka showed no remorse. When one of his own homies asked why he shot the girl, he reportedly replied, "F them, they deserved it." And just like that, Dedric Gobert's life ended in the same kind of street violence he helped portray on film. No red carpet, no director yelling cut, just a cold stretch of pavement in Mira Loma. After the police rolled through Etowanda Avenue and scattered the crowd, most folks dipped. Nobody wanted to be around for questions or citations. Dedric, Nacho, Jenny, and Male linked up a few blocks down at the parking lot of a local pizza spot. Not to grab a slice, it was already past 2 a.m., but to chill, debrief, and shake off the tension. They weren't looking to press the issue. Dedric had just watched Nacho get jumped by 10 dudes, and the whole vibe was off. But the kind of folks they had run into earlier, they didn't just take an L and walk it off. That other group, they had something to prove. And that's when things started to turn. Unbeknownst to Dedric and his people, the group they had clashed with at the race was already regrouping. Some of them had dipped right after the fight, but others had gone to call backup. Witnesses and later court testimony confirmed that several of the Filipino-American gang members from ABC had hit up more homies to slide through. They weren't planning to let the night end on a soft note. The ABC gang, Aqua Boyz Crazy, was known in the area for being deep and not backing down. Based out of cities like Cerritos and Carson, a lot of their members were in the Inland Empire, and they had a strong presence in Mira Loma. These weren't just some random dudes out for a race. They were a tight-knit clique repping blood culture. Even though they weren't black, red gear, set calls, and that same retaliatory mindset. Around 2:15 a.m., cars started pulling into the parking lot. At first, it was just a few, then more. Some pulled up blasting music, others parked dark, but the energy was off. Witnesses say the group that showed up this time wasn't just 10 deep. It was more like 20 to 30, almost all Filipino. Some had red flags, some had visible tattoos, and some were already throwing up gang signs as they got out. They weren't trying to talk it out, they were here for part two. Dedric's crew was still outside the car when the group approached. It popped off quick, words first. One dude in particular stepped forward and pointed a gun at Jenny's face. He didn't fire, not yet. An older head from the same group checked him, pulled him back, told him to chill. That moment might have saved her life. Male tried to play peacemaker. She spoke directly to the older gang member, asking him to let everyone go their separate ways. He agreed. For a brief moment, the tension dropped. Everyone started backing off, but Dedric? He was still heated. He jumped back in his car and started doing slow laps across the lot. Not fast, not reckless, just revving the engine, creeping past the crowd, over and over. Anyone from the hood knows what that means. It's not an attack, but it's not peaceful either. It's a statement. Maybe Dedric thought they would get spooked. Maybe he was trying to stunt, or maybe it was just adrenaline talking. But the crowd noticed, and they weren't having it. The ABC crew started shouting, loud now, "Blood, blood, blood," over and over, chanting like a war call. That's when the temperature really changed. Dedric hit the brakes, parked the car. He stepped out, alone. Eyewitnesses later said it was bold, reckless, or just plain suicidal. Because standing in front of him was a crowd of over 24 gang-affiliated men, most of them already fired up, half of them armed. Dedric didn't blink. He started walking toward them, chest out, no fear on his face. Then he raised his hands and threw up a Crip sign. He said, "What's up, cuz?" Now in South Central, that's regular Crip lingo. But when you're facing down a crowd repping blood sets, it's an open invitation for war. It's a diss. And it hits harder when it comes from someone who just got done circling you in a loud car like he's untouchable. Then he took it further. F you slobs. That word slob is the worst kind of slur in gang language when talking to Bloods. It ain't just disrespect, it's venom. And Dedric knew it. Then he said it, "I ain't scared to die." At that moment, everything stood still. Nobody moved right away. Some of the ABC members reportedly laughed, like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. To them, Dedric looked like he had a death wish, but the vibe flipped again when he reached for his waistband. That was it. One of them shouted, "He's reaching!" They swarmed him. He didn't get a shot off. He didn't even have a weapon, but in that world, you don't wait to find out. They jumped him on sight. He dropped to the ground under a wave of fists and kicks. Male screamed. Jenny tried to run in. Nacho, seeing his friend getting stomped, jumped into the middle of the crowd and threw himself over Dedric's body. He covered Dedric with his own body. Real loyalty. Witnesses say Jenny caught a boot to the face while trying to protect her boyfriend. Male was yelling, trying to pull folks back, but she couldn't stop it. Then for a second, it calmed. A few of the ABC members started walking away. Maybe they thought it was done. Maybe they figured Dedric had been punished enough. Some said the energy shifted, like the worst was over. And then the gun came out. Sonny and Raka had been in the crowd the whole time. A known shooter from ABC, he was already on edge, high on meth, according to later reports. He pulled out a .38 revolver, walked up to Nacho, grabbed him by the shoulder, shot him in the chest, then a second shot to the back of the head. Dedric was still lying face up, and Raka turned the gun on him and pulled the trigger. One shot to the head. Jenny, barely able to stand, rushed at Raka and kicked him. He turned and shot her point blank in the neck. She dropped. The lot went quiet. Everyone ran. Cars peeled off, tires screeching. In less than a minute, 2 were down, 1 paralyzed, and the crowd was gone. Just pavement, shells, and silence. Around 2:20 a.m., Riverside County deputies pulled up. It was too late. Dedrick Gobert and Ignacio Hernandez were both pronounced dead on scene. Jenny Hyon was alive, barely. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. The bullet had torn through her spinal cord. She'd never walk again. Dedrick Gobert, the quiet kid with the pacifier in Boyz in the Hood, was now another young man shot dead in the streets. The same kind of scene his movie tried to warn people about. But there were no credits this time, no audience clapping, only blood on the ground and sirens in the distance. News broke quick. The Los Angeles Times ran the headline, "Actor is one of 2 men killed in drag race fight." Most people didn't recognize Dedric's name right away, but when they heard the guy with the pacifier from Boyz in the Hood, it clicked. John Singleton's team confirmed his identity. He had also just finished filming Higher Learning, set for release in January 1995, but Dedric wouldn't be around to see it. Police got to work fast. Witnesses at the scene gave up names, descriptions, car types. One name kept popping up, Sonny Raka, Filipino, 22, known shooter from the ABC gang. By December 12, 1994, less than a month later, Raka was arrested. He'd been hiding out, but tips led authorities to him. He claimed he wasn't involved, that he was with his girl that night. Didn't matter. Multiple witnesses from both sides ID'd him, gang homies even flipped. Lester Maliwat and Roger Boring gave up full accounts. They weren't trying to go down for murder. One by one, the pieces locked in. Raka had gang ties, a history of violence, and had allegedly been on meth that night. The trial didn't start till 1999, almost 5 years later. But when it did, it hit hard. The DA built a rock-solid case, eyewitnesses, forensic evidence. Even gang experts came in to explain what certain phrases meant, how the provocations escalated, and why failure to respond would be seen as weakness in gang culture. Jenny Hyon testified. Now wheelchair-bound, she told the jury what happened, how she watched her boyfriend get stomped and shot, how she tried to stop it, how her life changed in a single second. Raka's lawyers tried to blame confusion, said he wasn't clearly ID'd, that he didn't mean to shoot, that it was chaos, but the evidence didn't lie. The bullet in Dedric's head, the shell casings, the testimonies. On May 5th, 1999, the jury came back, guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, guilty of attempted murder for shooting Jenny, special circumstance, multiple murders. On May 12th, Sonny Raka was sentenced to death. He was shipped to San Quentin, inmate number P48601. California's governor placed a moratorium on executions in 2019, so he still sits on death row today. But for Dedric, for Nacho, for Jenny, the sentence had already been carried out. The damage was forever. The news hit hard. The guy with the pacifier from Boyz in the Hood had been murdered in real life. Dedrick Gobert was just 22 when he got dropped in that Miraloma parking lot. The same kind of senseless street violence his movie had tried to highlight ended up taking his life. Higher Learning, his last film, dropped a few months later in January 1995. He was barely visible in it, just one of Ice Cube's homies on campus. But that small cameo felt heavier knowing it was posthumous, a reminder of what could have been. Dedric never got the big breakout role, he was just getting started, but Singleton kept calling him back, which meant something. You don't bring an actor into 3 different films unless you see real potential. Ignacio Hernandez, just 19, died trying to save his friend. Jenny Hyon, 16, survived, but the bullet left her paralyzed from the neck down. She testified in court, recounting the shooting, the pain, the damage. Sonny and Rocca got arrested less than a month later on December 12, 1994. He tried to deny it at first, said he was with his girl. But multiple people from his own set flipped, told detectives exactly what he did. In 1999, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The jury handed him the death penalty. He was shipped to San Quentin's death row. But in 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom placed a moratorium on executions, so Rocca's death sentence now sits in limbo. Dedric's name doesn't come up often in Hollywood retrospectives, but in the streets and among fans of Singleton's work, people still remember. He was more than a character with a pacifier. He was a reminder that sometimes life imitates art a little too closely. In one of the last scenes of Boyz in the Hood, Doughboy says, "Either they don't know, don't show, or don't care about what's going on in the hood." Dedric Gobert's story forces us to care, because for some, the hood isn't just a setting on screen, it's the ending.